Hello and welcome to Introduction to Foresight. My name is Ciprian Stănescu and I'm happy to take this journey with you. The future is going to be not just different than what we expected, but also more and more difficult to understand. Business leaders, policymakers, and social entrepreneurs need to equip themselves and their teams with the best tools to understand future challenges, tools to see opportunities, understand future stakeholders, and create innovative solutions. There is no one road from the present to the future. Foresight helps us understand possible futures. Learning them will make us better prepared and create a competitive advantage. Paul Valéry was saying in 1937 that the future is no longer quite what it used to be. So let's learn to better understand the future together. What do we do in this course? We learn more about what foresight and strategic foresight is and where it comes from, how expected, alternative, and chosen futures look like. We talk about trends and trend watching, and a variety of tools to use foresight in our businesses, organizations, and societies. Before going deep into foresight, let me briefly present how I see the world. 9 macro and meta characteristics of the new world. Number 1. We live in a fragile economy that is subject to political and financial turmoils even stronger than before. Number 2. Processes are becoming more and more personalized. Number 3. The labor market is transforming like never before, also due to the new realities of the pandemic. Number 4. IoT, AI, big data, and the Metaverse are actually transforming the world around us. Number 5. Healthcare is digitalizing at a faster pace than predicted. Number 6. Lives take online shifts more than ever. We do live in times of accelerated climate change with high policy ambitions and low decision-making processes. Lifelong learning becomes a must for everyone. And number 9. There is a perceived tension in how democracies face the future. Moving to meta characteristics of this world, 9 that I personally see relevant. Number 1, instability, digitalization, distrust and uncertainty, a high level of depression and mental health challenges, autonomy in learning and doing, circularity and social economy, entrepreneurship in an entrepreneurial mood, extremism, and collaborative leadership. All these 18 characteristics of the new world can act decisively in the way our future is shaped. Some of us believe that the future is predetermined, some believe it is uncontrollable, and a small number believe that we can make the future. So let me welcome you to this class, and hopefully by the end of it, more of you will believe at least that you can have some part in how the world looks like 5, 10, or even 20 years from now. We have an amazing capacity to imagine the future, but imagining it is not enough, as we also need to see what are probable, preferred, or possible futures, not just imaginative ones. The topic of this class is foresight. So let's start with that. What is this? There are various definitions around the globe and in time, so let's incorporate some of them into the following. The purpose of foresight is to explore plausible, possible, probable, and alternative futures and identify the challenges and opportunities that may come out of it. Foresight can help companies, individuals, and countries to understand the forces shaping an ecosystem, how these can impact us in the future, and what unforeseen trends can appear. Foresight supports strategic planning and decision-making in anticipating and preparing for the challenges of the future, including long-term futures. In foresight, we don't do predictions, but develop strategies for plausible future scenarios. Foresight is sometimes mixed with forecasting. Forecasting takes data from the past and extrapolates it into the future using a variety of tools, from statistics to simulations. Forecasting helps users understand the present and the most likely future. However, these days, when the underlying systems are changing in fundamental ways, forecasting meets some of its limitations. Strategic foresight helps organizations, especially in VUCA situations, unlike traditional planning or forecasting. In particular these days, this type of world is the one we live in. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Foresight helps organizations to explore what they don't really know about the future. We can use foresight tools to ask questions we didn't know we need to ask, look around for trends and weak signals that can be essential for risk and opportunity assessments, and scan properly what others might do. Organizations using strategic foresight can better capitalize on opportunities, especially those that exist in the medium to long-term future. Most organizations and entrepreneurs take decisions usually based on expected futures. The high probability future scenario in this case is obviously very useful. However, events or processes with low probability and high impact are often ignored. Imagine you need to fix a car. Better, imagine you need to build a car. You know it has to serve its main purpose, which is to take you from point A to point B. You also need to go there fast, be safe, save fuel, bring others with you, feel comfortable, etc. Look good. Now you have a toolbox to build that car. How do you start? What tools do you use? Do you stop after using the first tool and say the toolbox is not good? It's the same with foresight somehow. Foresight is an academic discipline that draws on many other fields and is rooted in systems thinking. As a result, there are many tools in the futurist toolbox. Before using some of them randomly, you need to understand how to use them, what for, and when. Rafael Popper highlighted this challenge, quote, "So far, the selection of foresight methods has been dominated by the intuition, insight, impulsiveness, and sometimes inexperience or irresponsibility of practitioners and organizers. There are various formal foresight methods developed over the past decades for tech, policy, or business purposes. We will go through some of them in the coming minutes. This is an introductory class in foresight, so if you want to learn more or use our facilitation from Future Lab, just drop us a line at hello@innovationsolutions.eu. In conclusion, foresight is therefore based on two premises: that there is not one future but many possible futures, and that it is possible today to make choices that influence future developments. A famous neuropsychologist, Carl Pribram, said that we can learn a lot about the mind by observing it in action. According to him, mental processes have a holographic quality. Humans can recall pictures in their minds and replay movies from our past experiences. We can also create and manipulate pictures and models of completely new ideas in our minds. Humans use this capacity to practice a primitive version of foresight when doing tasks like extrapolation, impact assessment, and scenario building. Practitioners of foresight like Walk or Sengi have discussed heavily in the past years about the central role of mental models in foresight. So let's also look at one now from Policy Horizons Canada, a federal government organization in Canada that conducts foresight for and with the government of Canada. Here are some ways the Horizons Foresight method from Canada works with our natural capacity to improve foresight. First of all, we need to work with people's mental models. There is a branch of cognitive science that explores the roles of mental models in thinking. According to this set of theories, the mind constructs small-scale models of reality that it uses to anticipate events, to reason, to underlie explanation, etc. Mental models have a structure that corresponds to the structure of what they represent. They are akin to architects' models of buildings, to molecular biologists' a model of complex molecules, and to physicists' diagrams of particle interactions. Everyday reasoning depends on the simulation of events in mental models. According to this theory, the four building blocks in mental models are facts, assumptions, experience, and dialogue. So how do we do this? Well, first of all, we use graphics to support visualizations. A human can only keep 5 to 7 things in working memory at a time, which makes dialogue and progress on complex topics difficult and frustrating. Good graphics can help the group manage complexity. For instance, complexity is reduced when participants can point to a drawing and talk about how and where a change driver impacts a system. Focus on the system. For many people, talking about the future can be like swimming in the dark. In most cases, putting the system at the center of the study will make it easier and maximize strategic insight. Participants in the Horizon Foresight method, for example, run mental simulations to visualize how the system could evolve under different conditions at each step. We need to work with assumptions. Assumptions are a very strategic focus for foresight. They shape perception and decisions and are one of the building blocks in mental models. If you state several assumptions about a system, most people will use them to build a mental model instantly and then test it against their own mental model of the topic. Surfacing and testing assumptions is one of the important functions of foresight. Another way to do it is to immerse participants in the future. Most people are focused on the expected future and are less aware of the weak signals or disruptive changes that could impact their policy domain or their industry, especially changes coming from beyond their silo or area of responsibility. In a foresight exercise, participants need to be familiar with all the significant changes that could disrupt their system. And speaking about systems and ecosystems, let's take a look at systems thinking. Strategic foresight looks at transformation from a systemic perspective. A system, or even better, an ecosystem, employs various parts that influence each other in various degrees of ways. Because these interactions among system parts often result in unexpected results, predicting the outcome of intra- and intersystemic interactions is very difficult. We need to ask the right questions in a human-centered system in order to create a strong and valid action plan. For example, Freya van Doorn and Peter Bishop put forward in 2018 a series of questions to start our foresight journey. What is our driving system? What are the underlying structural relationships? What is already in our pipeline? What would be the role of our organization in the future? Let's look now at a different type of future, expected futures. In this type of future, which most people relate to, nothing really changes. We expect it to happen. Plausible futures is another type of future. This is similar to expected futures and involves events and processes which could reasonably occur. Preferred futures or the desired future. Have you ever heard the phrase, you can be anything you want, you can change the future? This is an important type of future because it allows us to have a North Star or a goal, but it should not be taken for granted. Perhaps an adaptable preferred future is more useful. All three types of futures are important. Baseline futures, based on what we know and expect alongside discontinuity futures and desired ones, make up what will happen tomorrow. Nevertheless, what we need to take into account as individuals and businesses is some form of plausibility. Enter the cone of plausibility. Immediate futures are very possible and are part of our expected future. Unless dramatic changes or accidents happen, the next weeks and months will pretty much look like an expected future. The further away we move, the more alternative futures appear with various degrees of probability. The more companies and policymakers study these alternatives, the more prepared they will be. A preferred or desired future is obviously just one of the many alternative futures. What some organizations tend to do is prepare just for this type of future. That doesn't usually take them to a good place. Adaptability is a great skill, but should be used as an exception, not as a rule. So how do you get started with foresight? First of all, it matters why you want, as a business leader, as a team, as a social entrepreneur, or as a policymaker, to learn more and use foresight. And it also matters at what level you are. Foresight tools and the pace of it for an SME are not always the same we would use for a large corporate or for a public authority. On this, we develop a working tool adaptable to all levels of maturity and type of actor aiming to use foresight in their growth. The Anticipatory Canvas. This is a tool that was developed by Social Innovation Solutions to help organizations and decision makers identify key driving forces, trends, and base decisions on a better understanding of probable and alternative futures. So how do you start the Anticipatory Canvas, for example? Well, like in most foresight processes, one should identify the driving forces shaping their business, industry, or economic system. We need to look at contextual or indirect environments, usually characterized as steep social, technological, economic, environmental, and political or policy changes. We can also add, depending on who we work with, drivers of change related to culture, regulation, or demography. These driving forces that we could also call trends operate in two interconnected environments, the closer and the broader one, the external one. The closer environment is the transactional one. It's in your everyday business operations, and it contains driving forces that operate on relatively short time frames and have a faster pace of change. The broader external environment has stronger forces like tech development, climate change, geopolitics, but with a slower and sometimes lower impact on your transactional environment. Smart organizations always pay attention to what happens at a broader level, not just to assess risks, but as important, find new opportunities. In section 1 of 9 of the Anticipatory Canvas, for example, we take participants on a journey to better understand the probable and possible impact of trends and drivers of change in their contextual context. Each participant researches on probable trends and their impact on their business and industry, from social and consumer trends to tech and innovation trends, regulation, and economic and business model trends. Let's look now at a very basic foresight tool, which is scenario development. Scenarios of alternative futures containing the expected future as well as the desired one. Take half a day in your organization in an external facilitated workshop to go through some contextual scenarios for the future by using the STEEP analysis and the systems logic approach. Offer your team an opportunity to use their imagination and ambitions to create meaningful conversations on where your organization might be going. You will not find a new scenario to base your future decisions on through a half-a-day exercise. But you will find something even more important than that: the power of conversation and shared futures among your colleagues. Other types of scenarios you could try are normative, pessimistic, or goal-oriented scenarios. Scenario building can result in the same day and in the same team with different and even opposing views. That is the beauty of foresight. In the same time, it expands not just horizons, but also opportunities in a strategic reframing context. Let's take 5 minutes to explore now the links between neuroscience and foresight. As humans, we can imagine and at the same time predict and construct images of the future regardless of the fact that it doesn't exist yet. A better understanding of our brain may contribute and incorporate disruptive enablers that can change the future trajectory of events and how we think about those events when projected into the future. For example, if Elon Musk did not think about colonies on Mars, perhaps he would not be building low-cost rockets. Foresight experts and futurists have long known that not all people perceive the future in the same way. As neuroscience continues to deliver new knowledge for us to make use of, it may also offer up new methods and tools for envisioning and enhancing alternative futures and scenarios. Recent studies seem to indicate that our construction of future events is strongly linked to what we know about the past. Our brains are an anticipatory system by nature, trying constantly to anticipate, compare, predict, and sense the next steps to preserve us. Neuroscience linked to foresight can deepen future thinking and explore subsegments such as temporality, future scenarios, and disruptions to further understand connectivity between neural processing and varying levels of futures thinking. It has been agreed by many experts that one of the most fascinating aspects of human cognition is the ability to withdraw from the current moment and to mentally transport to another time, place, or perspective. Furthermore, the ability to envisage potential future scenarios relates to the complete system of the brain, the nervous system, and the sensory systems while remaining in a constant state of prediction. It is certainly no coincidence that computers have been to a large extent modeled by our brain functions and sensory systems on how they access, store, perceive, and project data that can influence both our views and actions with regard to the future.